This is a podcast where our young champions will come together and talk about issues that are important to young people with learning disabilities. In this podcast, we're going to talk about the facts about relationships, as well as our experience with relationships and sexual health. And we're going to round it off with talking about advice and resources that we hope will support people to have their own intimate relationships. My name is Lisa. I'm a Power-Up Officer and the Youth Empowerment Coordinator for My Life, My Choice. And I'm here today with lots of people like Minty, Jackie, Pam and Dawn to talk to you guys about relationships and sexual health. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Pam. I'm a consultant at My Life, My Choice.
Then Jackie.
I'm from Life My Choice and I help all the staff.
My name is Dawn and I'm a consultant at My Life My Choice.
I'm Minty and I've been with My Life My Choice for nearly 5 years and I love it. I think it's amazing.
The reason why the guys want to talk about relationships is because how important they are. Having a relationship with another person, be it a friendly one or an intimate one, is good for our well-being. These friends, boyfriends or girlfriends, help us when we're feeling down. I'm sure a lot of us have seen just how important they are during all the lockdowns we have been through in the last 2 years. Despite how important relationships are, especially intimate ones, having a relationship as a person with a learning disability is difficult. They face many barriers in starting and then maintaining these relationships. I'm going to first take us to Jackie, Pam and Dawn to talk to us about a research project that I worked with them on a few years ago that was about relationships. The research they did was funded by an organisation called DRILL, which stands for Disability Research on Independent Living and Learning. And they did the research with an organisation called the NDTI, the National Development Team for Inclusion. Dawn, could you tell me a little bit more about the research that you guys did? Like why you did the research?
To find out how many people with a learning disability had a relationship.
Do you remember who you spoke to?
People with learning disabilities.
Family carers. Is it family carers?
It is family carers, yeah.
And service people that buy the services.
Yeah, it was commissioners. It was commissioners,
Yeah.
and we also spoke to support staff and I think service managers. Like you said, Dawn, you learned from them about how many people had relationships, but we also went into more depth, didn't we? We found out about what it was like having a relationship for people with learning disabilities. And we also heard from them about what stopped them from having relationships. During the research, you guys identified quite a few barriers. Can you tell us more about them?
It was carers and family members that were stopping them from having their relationships.
Yeah. I think, Jackie, you mentioned that as well about the family carers and the support staff stopping people having relationships. Yeah. Do you remember why they stopped them having relationships?
I don't think they had the capacity to have a relationship.
That's right. We found that support staff kept using the Mental Capacity Act against people instead of for them when it came to relationships and sex. Some support staff just assumed that a person didn't have capacity when they actually did, so they could not have that conversation with them or support them to have a relationship. Did any other stories we heard stick out to you guys?
They're two of our friends once.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit more about those, Pam?
Two of our friends have been together for like 9 years, but their staff in their houses won't let them live together because there's the stairs on one of the houses. Yeah, the other one has stairs anyway.
Yeah, because I think it was because they are scared of that person falling down the stairs, even though they have stairs in their own home. And it was the support staff using that as a reason why they shouldn't be in a relationship and shouldn't have private time with one another. It just didn't make any sense to stop them from being together. And I remember us hearing these stories again and again, that staff were using things like risk assessments, the capacity act in the wrong way to stop people from doing things that they had the right to do. I remember we spoke a little bit about why people did this. And if I remember right, it was for a mixture of things. For some, it was cultural differences, but for others, it was a moral issue. For some, not just support staff, but also relatives. They felt that the person they were supporting was more like a child than an adult, and they treated them like a child instead of an adult. The thought never crossed their minds that they were an adult who has the right to have a relationship. It was like the thought that someone disabled could be a sexual being never crossed their minds.
Did we find out about any good things that happened? Any cases of services doing a good job and supporting people to have relationships?
There was a few, yeah.
There was a few. Could you tell us a bit more about those, Pam?
Well, there's a couple that I interviewed, and they were doing a great job of helping them and supporting them to actually go out and have fun with somebody, with a girl or a boy.
Yeah. And it was really great. I remember that interview, and it was them saying, like, they would support them, and they were also saying that they would support that person to have, like, same-sex relationships as well. And I remember there was another story
where we heard from one service manager that they were supporting a person to transition from, I believe it was from a man to a woman. And it was great to hear that story because, as we know, the world is very heteronormative, which means the world assumes that everyone's straight and you can only identify as the gender you were born as. To hear a story where someone is being supported to be gay or trans or so on is really fantastic.
Do you guys have any advice for people with learning disabilities who want to have a relationship?
Just stay safe and make sure you get the education you need to stay safe.
Yeah, so get the education. Yeah, Dawn and Jackie, can you guys think of any other things?
There's organisations out there that can help you to have a relationship.
Yeah, could you name some of them for us, Dawn?
Make some dates.
Thanks for that, Dawn. And Jackie, do you have any advice for anyone who might also want to have a relationship?
As long as they're taking the pill or they're using condoms, they won't get pregnant.
Yeah, so I guess it's about, like, knowing, before you go and have a relationship, make sure that you know the ins and outs of having a relationship and sexual health. And I guess to help them have sex education, there are resources out there that might support them to sort of understand and learn those things. And I think Pam might know more about this one, but Pam, do you remember the relationships charter that came out of the research?
Kind of, but not really
Kind
that
of.
much.
That's okay. So that one, it talks about people's rights and the responsibilities they have when they have a relationship, and it's all an easy read, I'm fairly sure, and that would be a good resource for people to sort of understand that side of it.
Thank you so much for that, guys, for the advice as well as the findings from the research project you did. Now let's talk to Minty, who can tell us a little more about what it is like as a young person who is just starting to have relationships and starting to think about their sexual health. And I just want to say thank you, Minty, for being here and for being up for talking about this, as I know talking about relationships and sexual health is awkward, as I'm very sure you know. And I want to know, where are you in your journey to learning about relationships and your sexual health?
Once I spent about 50 an hour with my doctor that he just wants to talk to me about it, but I normally spend 5 minutes with each patient, but with me he spends an hour talking to me about it.
I'm glad to hear you had such a good experience with your doctor in talking to him about relationships and sexual health. And it's great to hear that he was able to dedicate that time to make sure you were comfortable and understood fully the things you wanted to know about. And during that conversation with your doctor, what went well and what helped make that conversation not as awkward as it could have been? What could they do?
Sit down and just shut up and listen. Firstly,
Yeah, that would be a really good step to having that conversation. So personally, I remember like about it being so awkward, and I've had to think about like what tips I could give people really to help make that conversation less awkward. And I guess we're thinking about sex and like the things around sex, like consent. Those things, like we always talk about consent related to sex, but consent can work around with lots of other things as well. Like, for example, like Minty, I could ask you, would you like to go to the pub? And you might answer yes, but you also might answer no. And that's also about consent, like going somewhere with another person, maybe going and having a hug with another person as well. That is like with your bodily autonomy. So that's talking about like who can and can't touch your body. That's another really important thing for people to understand. And hugging is a really good way for people to start introducing that. Maybe not even hugging, like giving someone a high five, giving a person a handshake, you know? There are lots of steps before you talk about sex that will help them sort of like understand those things and ease them into that conversation so that not everything's completely brand new to them. Yeah, and I guess another good thing a person can do if they want to talk about sex with another person is that, you know, all around us, we have like experiences and things that are happening around us that would be good things to talk about to help introduce someone to sex. So I know for you, Minty, both of your brothers have recently had babies, haven't they?
Yeah.
So for that one, maybe like, for example, if someone has a relative who's pregnant, maybe you could talk a bit about like, how did they become pregnant? What is it like when they give birth and stuff? You know, it's a good, like those real life examples really help people, I think, understand it because they can see it happening in front of them. And I think that's a really good way for people to, again, like ease into that conversation. And I know the TV, there's lots of things that happen on there that are really important for people to know about. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff about like social media and sex and like porn and sex. And again, like those things are really helpful for people to know about. I think these bits of advice are good for anyone who wants to start to have that conversation with someone. And I think one last thing I would like to add on is that especially if you know that person is, when you have that conversation with them, like use age-specific words or like age-appropriate words, but also use words that you know that that person understands.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And like you said, like taking the time with that person to really go over that information is really helpful. But I know from experience, like talking to my parents about sex, talking with teachers and friends about sex, it can be embarrassing. It can be really embarrassing and awkward,
If you're not comfortable, it's looking to your family or friends about it, go to a counselor.
Yeah, counsellor. They could also go to their GP and their doctor, a nurse. Yeah. Are there any resources out there that you would recommend for people who want to know more about sex and sex health?
Yeah, go to your GP, your doctor, or a pharmacy. And I know that sounds weird, but if you say, can I ask you a question? I will take you into another room.
That's a really good thing to know, that the conversation you have with your doctors, it's confidential, you know, it's private. What you say to your doctor will be kept between the two of you. So try not to feel awkward or anxious about asking them anything or questions or anything like that. And I'm thinking, what like documents could people go and find on things on the internet that people can use?
Leaflet round your doctor surgery, pharmacy, leaflet on your pharmacy, and community centres.
Yeah, those are really good. I know an app called Be Safe and Have Fun, and it's made especially for people with learning disabilities who are like above the age of 14, I think. And it's a really good accessible app for young people and adults to use when they're on the go. And it's designed so that you use the app before you engage in any sort of like sexual activity. So if you have any questions or worries, you ask the app and it'll tell you the answer right away. And I believe it's only available on Androids, but it's something people should definitely check out if they have the chance to. The Sexual Health Toolkit was created by Minty along with our other young members in our Young Champions Parliament. They wanted to create this after a conversation they all had with one another when they were receiving some training about sexual health. And through their conversations, they found that there were some areas of relationships and sexual health that they didn't know about, like the names of the body, about consent, as well as like the ins and outs of sex and the options in terms of contraception. And I think a big thing that stood out to me as a reason why we wanted to make this toolkit was because of the lack of accessible resources that exist about sexual health and relationships for young people with learning disabilities. So a lot of the stuff that exists, it's very wordy and it doesn't really have any like activities for people to do to practice what they've just learned. And our hopes is that with this toolkit, you know, that it's accessible, that it's practical, and that it's very young person focused. And we hope that people can either use it by themselves or teachers in schools or colleges can use it as a resource to help with their lessons and their students learn about these things. And the topics we chose for the toolkit were agreed on by all of the members of the groups. And we decided to focus on body, choice, and sex. And, you know, initially we started from a really, really long list. I included those 3 things, but also included, I think, sexuality and identity. But we picked these 3 topics because we thought they were like the essential things people would need to know before they go and have sex. And I really like the activities that we've come up for each of these topics. And I was wondering, Minty, would you like to talk about one of your favourite sections and why we made it the way it is? And I know the one you were most keen on talking about was consent, wasn't it?
You kind of know when the behaviour like, yeah, let's do it, or I am not sure. And they actually, I don't want to do it because she is not sure about, because of your son or boy, like when you're angry at someone, it'd be like, oh, leave me alone. But when they're happy, it's like, yeah, come in.
Yeah, so we thought about how someone would say something, what they would say, and how they would move their face and their body, and what that means in terms of consent. And I think we've done a really good job at giving people a few scenarios in the toolkit where they can judge for themselves if the people are giving consent or not. And we've done similar things for other topics within sexual health. And I realise we're speaking a lot about the toolkit, but we haven't mentioned when and where people can find it. And the toolkit, it will be coming out during Sexual Health Week, which runs from the 13th to the 19th of September. And you can find it on our website, on the My Life and My Choice website. So if you have any free time, you know, please check it out. The group, Minty and I, we hope that we have more parts of the Sexual Health Toolkit that come out in the future and cover the other topics that we didn't have a chance to cover in this one. Thank you so much for talking about it with me, Minty. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's listening to this podcast. And I hope you've enjoyed learning about all the things that we've been up to over the last few years and very recently too. And we hope to release our next podcast in November. And we're hoping that it will be about access. So that's access to social opportunities, education, and even more.